Cause you're listening to Jams and Tea, you won't see the show on your TV, so we talk about things musically. Cause you're listening to Jams and Tea, you're listening to Jams and Tea.
Hello everyone and welcome to a brand new 2021 edition of the Jams Tea podcast, where we spin the jams and spill the tea. And today we are coming at you on the first of the year with reviews of the new Taylor Swift album, Evermore. Is that what it's called?
Yeah, that's the one.
That's
The Battle
Evermore.
of Evermore.
Yep, that's the one.
Led Zeppelin.
Mhm.
Loop Zoop.
Yep, that's the one. And the other album we are going to be reviewing today is the one by the Avalanches that I also don't remember the title of. So
We will always
love you.
We will always
which we will.
love you. And we will because
always
you are our
love you.
glorious listeners. But on our Record Club episode today, we are coming at you with an overdue episode of Morgan's recommended album, which is, this week, Third Eye Blind's Self-Titled.
Yeah, that's going to be a lit video. Definitely don't miss that one.
Can I just jump in and say that I have missed hearing that so much. So happy to be back.
Also, August will not be joining us today. He is busy, but we did want to give a shout out to the fact that August music project Glacier Flower has released a new single that is up right now on his YouTube channel. Go check it out. It is 8 minutes long. It's called Silva, and fucking go at it, because that project is going to also be lit as fuck.
Yeah, got that 21 album hitting later this year. We gonna be reviewing that, bitch.
So we are going to kick off every episode the way we always do, which is talking about what we have been listening to in the past week or so. Man, it has been so weird not doing this for 2 weeks.
Yeah, really.
Just listening to music and being like, where do I put this?
Yeah, the things I've wanted to like shout about having listened to.
Right?
Yeah.
But yeah, here's to a new year of the Jams and Tea podcast.
Cheers, everyone.
Cheers. I don't have.
Yeehaw.
Yep.
Anyway, you first, Jack Finney.
Okay. Today, might as well get this out of the way just because it's topical, and just to rip the Band-Aid off quick, no way to get around it. The announcement yesterday was revealed to us. The final sting of 2020 is that we lost a hip-hop legend, one Mr. MF Doom, Daniel Dumoulin, was revealed to have passed on Halloween, which has... Yeah, that's been tough to deal with. So I have been.
That shit hurted.
Yeah, it really did. So I have used that as an excuse to go back through some of my more beloved records of his, just because I have been a huge fan of his since my musical inception. I listened today to Vaudeville Villain. I listened to Take Me to Your Leader, the King Ghidorah Project. I listened to Venomous Villain, and I listened to like half of Mad Villainy. And yeah, I mean, just like, if you haven't ever gotten into him, like, there's really no like horrible place to start. He's such a prolific dude, and he made so much good music. Please check all of it out. It's like all great. But yeah, that sucked. But I have been reveling in that. But you know, hey, it's a good excuse to listen to a great crop of records. But other than that, I guess. This is a little bit further back, but I'll just say I have been getting deep into Converge, which has been a long put-off thing with me, considering how much I just enjoyed records like All We Love We Leave Behind and Jane Doe. Just like initially I like loved them and just was like, this band has a big discography of records that all look great. Why don't I check out none of them? And now I listened to all of them, and holy shit! I'll shout out my favorite one, which is "You Fail Me." I believe that is the album that followed up their most acclaimed release, Jane Doe.
That's correct.
Which has a fascinating story behind it in regards to its artistic sort of. Goals, I guess, that the band went through. Reading up on it, it was very rewarding to me. Listen to the Redux version of that album. It is remastered by a guy who did a lot of the production on later Converge albums, and it sounds great. It sounds richer, fuller. it's just more pummeling and punishing. Listening to Converge is always an exercise in masochism, but I enjoy it very much. It is my exact brand of that. Um, and other than that, I went back to an album that I haven't heard in some time, just because I've only listened to Loveless by My Bloody Valentine, like for the first time a couple months ago. So I rechecked out their most recent record. They haven't released one since
That's
MBV,
correct.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
I listened to MBV, which is a great album. I like that album a whole lot. It's like weirder, leaner, kind of more of an alt-rocky thing. It's a little bit more of a direct album. Like the shoegazy stuff isn't as prominent in it, but I kind of like that about it. It's pretty good. It's cool. I know some people who prefer that to Loveless, and I like them about the same, but that's kind of mystifying to me.
Yeah, it's a bad take. I'm just gonna say that. But it's not a bad album. It's a good album.
Oh, I listen to, just because I listen to music a lot at my job, and sometimes when we get really, really busy, I'm not able to do anything to change the album I'm listening to. So if my thing is on repeat, it'll just keep going. So I listened to my first album by the Chameleons, Script of the Bridge, like three times in a row one day. I love that album.
I love it too. Where is it?
Incredible. It's like a golden era The Cure album. It's like fucking the midway point between like Faith and Disintegration, and it's fucking excellent. Just
It's a great way to describe
uniformly
it.
fantastic shit. And I love that a lot. If you're into that, go check that out.
I
And
just
the
want
last
to
thing-
say, like, I've been like nagging people to listen to that record for so long.
And it's
So the fact that
fucking
you really
great.
liked it, it makes me so happy.
Yeah, that's like that's going to be an all-timer for sure. And I, of course, at the behest of Tyler, I mentioned getting into Sunbather by Death Heaven a couple months ago, and I finally took a properly listen to New Bermuda, which is almost as good somehow. I don't know how this band is this good, this consistently. It's fucking mind-blowing, but like New Bermuda is just, it's something else. It's not Sunbather, but then again, what the fuck is?
It's yeah, I don't think it could be, just because it's so much more eclectic and varied than Sunbather is.
It's like Sunbather is a more like unified and consistent album, which is weird just because it also has like fucking weird like piano detours and shit. But like New Bermuda has that too, but it's also like fucking hard as hell.
Yeah.
And then it's also just like the dreamiest thing they've ever made. It's like it's an exercise in the extremes of the band, whereas Sunbather is more like reined in and like tight, focused. Whereas like New Bermuda is just like balls to the wall, just them experimenting, and all of it works. It's like, so yeah, that's what I've been listening to in the past couple weeks, more or less. Lots of Jake shit.
Well, I have not listened to anything new in a bit
Valid.
outside of fucking this. So what I have been listening to is just a lot of shit that I've heard before. I re-listened to Anti-Socialites by dream pop group Alvase.
One of my favorite albums.
Shit rules. I still find myself preferring the debut, but it's like...
Not gonna lie, you're weird for that, but I respect it.
I also re-listened to the third American football record. I maintain that it's their best.
And you're right. You were right for that.
It's my favorite. I don't know if I would call it their best, but it's the one I always come back to the most now.
Yep.
Yeah, it's just, it's pretty much perfect. And it's, especially after LP2, it was like, oh, okay, you're not just coming back for nothing. Okay.
Yeah.
Because LP2 was like, fine. It was fine.
I think
Three is such a left turn of an album. Like, I just didn't expect the sound they were going for at all.
I think like Mike Kinsella described their second album as like relearning their instruments, or like relearning how to be a band, and like
it do be sounding like it.
And like I think that's just kind of like him trying to politely retcon the fact that it wasn't received very well. But then when you do consider like the progression from 1 to 2 to 3, it's like, yeah, they still have a lot of life in them. And 3 is a beautifully serene record. Like the song, I always think about the song with Hayley Williams on it, and it's just it's
Uncomfortably Numb.
Yeah, it's such a beautiful song, and the whole record has that same kind of relaxed vibe. It's very, very. It reminds me in a lot of ways of like the Slow Dive comeback record that they put out a few years back, where it's like this band has come out of retirement after like 20 years or whatever, even though it's not quite the same situation with American football, but they come back and they've put out something that's incredibly mellow, incredibly lush, incredibly, for lack of a better word, vibey. There's no reason why it should work as well as it does. Because typically when you have comeback records, the best ones are the ones that are more immediate and in your face. But these are two bands that have managed to kind of like distill their essence to a very kind of like, in a very kind of like more moody and introspective way. And they ended up making their best records by kind of withdrawing rather than kind of like lunging at you. And I thought
kind of a truly great band, honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like the reason I confidently say that 3 is their best is, like the first record is obviously not, a lyric record, but the writing on 3 is just so much stronger.
That I
like,
categorically agree with.
And it's like, just the point of the first record is just to, once again, for lack of a better term, just kind of vibe. But like, there's a lot of really lyrically compelling stuff on 3 that I find myself really drawn to and has me coming back to it more than I have in the first one in my entire relationship with it.
Yeah.
It's also really bold of them to cover Opeth.
Yeah. Heir Apparent, that was pretty slapping.
It took me a minute.
Didn't think that would work, but
That's my favorite song on the album, actually.
Yeah, that's my favorite song by them.
It's pretty fucking great. Justice for Life support.
It's good. It's all good.
Yeah, it's true.
What else did I listen to? I listened to Meds by Placebo, which is probably my favorite of theirs.
Good take.
But it's like that is very difficult to say because the run from like Without You I'm Nothing up to Meds is like just fucking like
Sleeping with Ghosts is one of the most formative records ever for me.
Shit just owns.
Yeah, it's really good.
Yeah, that's a great album. They should make another album soon.
Please.
Or just ever, please. Like another one, please, guys.
Self-titled also super underrated. IMO.
Another one.
Thank you. Oh yeah, I forgot I did do one new listen. I listened to an album called White Noise by an artist called Noah Gunderson, who I found through a collaborative single that he did with Phoebe Bridgers. It's a mashup of Killer and his song The Sound, and that mashup is like one of the most incredible things I've ever heard in my life. And White Noise has 2 songs on it that are like 2 of my favorite songs ever and have been for years, but I just never listened to the whole album before now. And, nothing on there is quite as good as The Sound and Heavy Metals, but it's also like, most things aren't. My point is the album is just very good and you should listen to it.
Adding that right now and also putting a ban on anyone making a joke about the 1975.
I wasn't going to.
I was going to make a Fargo joke, but I decided not to.
Yeah, I was going to make a Fargo joke, yeah.
But, yeah.
It's hard to predict with you two. I'm sorry, but I gotta sometimes nip it in the bud.
That's fair. I will make a joke about literally anything if I can. So.
We know.
Yeah, I know.
We have been present
Yeah, I'm all
for such occasions.
Oh, Lord. Well, hopefully I will get many opportunities to do that today. So just getting it out of the way now, I have listened to the third release in 2020 of my favorite band, the Mountain Goats, which is a live album they've done. Of two sort of equivalent to what Twilight Sad did with Evermore this year. And they did two just over an hour long live streamed concerts. And they put them both together into a 2.5 hour long live record called the Jordan Lake Sessions Volumes 1 and 2. Only one song gets duplicated across both concerts, that being This Year. Second version of which is insane. There are a few songs that are worse than they are on the record. There are a couple of songs that are better, namely Heel Turn 2, which has an outro that is fucking transcendent compared to the more moody piece on the record, which is that is from Beat the Champ. And yeah, I loved it a lot. It was great. What else I listened to this year? So this month, I listened to Blue by Joni Mitchell.
Ooh, wonderful album.
Is just so beautiful. As soon as I have disposable income, I am getting a physical copy of it. It's just, I loved it so much. It was so beautiful. Yeah, Joni Mitchell, good artist. I finally listened to Karma by Pharoah Sanders, which is another just transcendent piece of art.
Incredible.
It's just such a sonically diverse, texturally rich, joyous record, and I loved it.
It's one of those totemic records in its genre that's kind of like it's almost annoying to talk about because it's like there's not really much you can say for it except that it's just
had a similar experience with Mingus's Black Saint and the Sinner Lady recently. I was just like, what do I even say about this shit, man?
It's what it is.
Like
Yep.
No, if Black Saint and the Sinner Lady is like a soundtrack to like an unmade sort
noir
of French noir, then Karma is like the soundtrack to like an unmade Jodorowsky movie.
It's the last song on the Hereditary soundtrack for Howard.
Yeah, it is a bit, yeah. But it's just, it has this celebration of it's like a central emotional rock for like 35 minutes. And it just does that in such a way that makes you feel like this sort of like devotion to certain things in a really beautiful way. I loved it.
Yeah, like that record and Love Supreme it's just basically just channeling the divine. Like, and that's not even like just a hyperbolic way of saying it sounds amazing. They're literally those records are literally about trying to channel God through the music.
Yeah.
The thing is,
you listen to like Bitches Brew and you're just like
I mean, it was a bold move on Coltrane's part to make a record about spiritualism and the journey to religion when he is in fact God.
I mean, it's
so
I mean, jazz as a genre is a remarkable act of hubris that pays off 100%.
Yeah. Karma, the Black Saint and the Sinner Lady and Karma are records about cucking God.
I mean, really.
And they fucking did it.
It's something true of both of the Coltrane records that I own, is that they both come with incredibly enriching material to help you appreciate the record in really beautiful ways. I think I talked about that with Giant Steps a couple of episodes back. But speaking of Bitches Brew, I also listened to that this month.
Jazz record, baby!
So when I logged it on Music Board, I just said, "Well, do you want me to put this into words? You kidding?" And I kind of feel like that now, or it's just like it's like an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours or something.
Imagine if one of us put that for like a record club. Imagine having
No.
to talk about
It would
bitches.
it'd be like 2 hours of
Exactly.
Oh, it's great. Like I reckon that would be a dirty episode because there is actually, if you really get down to it, there's a lot of shit going on that record that you can talk about.
Oh yeah,
The
absolutely.
great thing
For
about
you, I am a dumbass.
No,
I
that's-
wouldn't be able to say
that's fair.
shit.
No, the cool thing about reviewing jazz is that you can just you can make it quite formulaic, your review, because you can just look at who's playing on it, what are they doing, and how does it sound, and you can basically get your whole review just talking about that. I mean, that's basically what we did for Ascension.
I was just about to say, I'm like, are you subtly adding me? Because
No, but that's fine. That's a good way of doing it, I think, because it's like that in jazz. You have to do that. You have to like look at all the players and what they're doing. You don't necessarily always take that same approach with other forms of music, but it's a
No.
good approach because you're really giving everyone equal weight.
Yeah, but no,
It kind
I
of
love.
teaches you to do that in music.
But no, I loved Bitches Brew. How could I not? I still can't decide between that and In a Silent Way.
I mean,
Yeah.
like,
Because they both released near to each other, but they take such different approaches to
imagine the
what they
fucking
do.
flex, the audacity of releasing
1
those
year.
records
1
in
year
the
apart.
span of 1 year.
like, oh my god.
Jesus Christ.
Like those records are just like Miles warming up, basically. Like he put out a bunch of shit in the 70s. Check out, I would highly recommend checking out the record that he put out right after Bitches Brew, which is called Tribute to Jack Johnson. That's another fusion record, but it goes much heavier on the fusion, so it's mainly kind of guitar driven as opposed to brass driven, and so you get that kind of more closer to Inner Mounting Flame side of fusion. In that record, and basically
The cocaine side.
yeah, exactly. And basically,
my favorite side.
yeah, it's like basically Miles throughout the 70s kind of went further down the fusion rabbit hole, and Bitches Brew and Silent Way are just like the opening act, basically. It's a wild journey.
Nothing gets me more excited than when I look up a jazz album and it has 2 tracks and it's 52 minutes long. I'm just like, oh yes.
Like you look at like A Silent Way next to Bitches Brew, In a Silent Way, it's like half an hour long, and it's still very sort of like heavy on mood and texture and atmosphere, but like it's relatively kind of sort of stripped back, and it sort of moves between like sort of like, let's say like 3 to 5 instrument pieces and movements in a song, and then you listen to Bitches Brew and it's like everything at once in different ways. And it will move between like this like groove with a drum and a bass and 2 different electric keyboards in each ear, and then trumpets and guitars come in, and again it's panned in super crazy ways to just throw you for a loop.
It's also I know we're not reviewing Bitches Brew, but I can't help but talk about it.
No, go ahead, do it. Go on.
Bitches Brew is also a marvel of editing as well, and it's not always immediately apparent how these records are made. But
I read up on it.
But Teo Macero created that record by splicing together all different sessions. Like it was recorded for like hours and hours and hours of material, and it was all kind of intercut and spliced together and created in the editing room. Basically, none of it was performed the way you're hearing it. It was all kind of tracked and then just completely
fucking love exposure shit.
The complete sessions is 4.5 hours long.
Oh my god.
And again, in those later 70s records, and particularly the live records, you get Teo going even crazier and like, yeah. Anyway, that's a conversation for another day, but I could talk about 70s Miles for hours.
Yeah, I can't wait to actually like do that one day for a record.
It's just such a fun journey. From one record to the next, you just get, yeah, it's such a fun journey.
We're doing the podcast from the literal start of the year, which means we have like literally 52 Record Club episodes to look forward to.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
it'll happen eventually.
Well, I was saying to Jake that this feels a lot like season 2 to me. And I think like that kind of gives a lot of license to approach records like that. They're sort of going to be more ambitious to talk about, and I think that's cool.
I mean, we did start off by talking about fucking Ascension.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Anyway, the fifth record I want to talk about is Ordinary Corrupt Human Love, which is one of my favorite things I've fucking ever heard. I loved it to pieces. Again, it's not quite Sunbather, but it's so different that I can't really compare them. I compared it to like listening to Bleed American for the first time at what that made me feel like, but it's like black metal and every song's 8 minutes long. Or like, God.
I think it's their finest integration of all the facets of their sounds yet. Like everything that you go through, like it's also heavily indebted to like classic rock as well in a way that other records aren't. Like
it's a weirdly accessible album for a
like the first project. The first track is like basically just like a piece of anthemic sort of instrumental classic rock, and then you get like George Clark's vocals coming in on top of it, and it's really surreal. But you get this kind of soaring chords and melodies that kind of reach up, and then you get and you go into fucking Honeycomb and Canary Yellow. I'll never forget the first time I heard those songs. I'll never forget it.
Honeycomb.
I literally remember exactly where I was because I was walking. I was actually going for a walk. I remember exactly where I was when I first heard Canary Yellow and the riff came in about 3 minutes in, and it was like, holy shit! Like that moment when Canary Yellow just explodes and you get it goes nuts.
Exactly, Tyler. Yes, I
got a jingle problem on our hands. Santa's going nuts.
We got a jingle problem over here.
Yeah.
Anyway. Oh my god.
I love that album.
Yeah, no, I loved it too. I made a tweet about it while I was listening to it. I think it was during Honeycomb. It was just at a certain point it kicked in, and I just felt like my soul has left my body. It is no longer there. Here it is. It was 49 seconds into Honeycomb.
The whole song just does that. There's a great section in the middle of that song where the whole thing kind of just breaks down, and they do breakdowns so well, that band do. No, and then it just kind of evaporates into this last part of the track, which is so beautiful and tranquil.
But I feel like they're just sort of borrowing from lots and lots of music that I like and means a lot to me, and working it into a black metal sound. And it just really felt like discovering it for the first time again. And look, my experience with Sunbather was super fucking personal and intimate.
Mine too.
It'll do that.
Yeah, well, it's just, it came to me actually the 2 days after we recorded the Artwork episode, but
that was so long ago.
Yeah, I know, right? But it just came to me at a moment where I needed a album that was going to do that to me, and then it did. So very few albums, even in the genre, I think are ever going to have a chance at having that sort of a chance coming together in that way. And it just happened that Sunbather was also one of the best things ever made.
Like it's one of those records like Loveless that's just genre defining. Like it comes along and it's immediately, the moment it comes out, it's like, this is what a kind of subgenre or a subsection of music has been building towards, and will now represent it going forward.
Like, but again, Ordinary Corrupt Human Love, very different vibe and sound, and I loved it so much. And that's my 5.
Okay, I'll go through mine then. So I've obviously listened to a lot of albums since we last recorded, but I've chosen 5 to talk about this week. Well, technically 6, but I'm going to group the first 2 together since they're both the same artist. And they are the last 2 albums from Death, Symbolic and The Sound of Perseverance.
Making it on that end of the year topster, boy.
Yes, yeah, holy macaroni. So I've spent the last 2+ months kind of gradually making my way through the short discography of Death, trying to soak each record in, give it the time and attention that it deserves, because they're incredibly technical records with a lot to appreciate. And I was, I knew what I was expecting going in, but it's really still experiencing it as something different. Listening to the way in which this band just continues to level up with almost every single successive
Tyler
album.
and I DMing the first time he listened to Symbolic was the most euphoric experience I've had in a long time.
Well,
He was just losing his fucking mind, and I was like, yes,
yeah,
yes.
because at the point at which I listened to Symbolic, I was already just so in love with Human. I was just like, this was like a record that had just become canonical, like in my heart. And I was like, every time I put it on, it was a blood rush. And I almost didn't want to listen to Symbolic because I didn't want that to be overtaken. Stupid as that sounds. Why wouldn't you want a better record than a record you love?
No, it's weird. It's like saying Symbolic is my third favorite Death album. It's just like, God, that feels wrong. I feel disgusting.
Well, yeah, fair enough. But it is definitely, I've decided it is the one that is now closest to my heart, somehow overtaking Human. And The Sound of Perseverance is every bit as good. I think if I had to rank the top three, I'd probably put Human and Symbolic above it, just because I like the concision of them. But it's not necessarily a criticism to say that I don't care for. It's not that I don't care for it. It's just a completely different mood I need to be in to listen to something like Sound of Perseverance, which is very progressive and multifaceted. And I love that, and I adore it. It's a 10 out of 10 album. And it's just a true credit to the band that they're so, that for a sound that might initially seem quite limiting, or at least quite prescriptive of a certain way that it's going to sound, a certain way it's going to be put together, they managed to do really unexpected and surprising things on all of their best records that make them feel distinctive and unique. And that's why they're going to be such a great band to talk about when we eventually do our
So excited
discography review on them. But yeah, those last two records are leveling up from heaven to whatever is above that. Yeah, another great record I listened to, incredibly underrated record, is a solo record from Ada Rook of Black Dresses. Obviously, Ada and Devi of Black Dresses have a huge volume of musical material and various side projects and solo records. Lots to dig into, kind of overwhelming to look at. But I do want to recommend the album I listened to, which was called Shed Blood from Ada. It's an incredible record about sort of processing abuse and growth and moving forward. It's not as just batshit in its kind of production style as something like Peaceful as Hell. So if you weren't huge on that, don't fear. It's much more, melodic and put together in a way that's a little bit more accessible, but still kind of eclectic and strange in the way that it does sound. It's just a record that, as well as being deeply emotionally moving, also just has a bunch of songs that just feel like classic songs instantly as soon as you hear them. There's a real, really strong melodic sensibility and a really incredible production style on it. It's a remarkable album that I think is sorely underappreciated. And really, I think the only reason people don't necessarily appreciate it is because of the sheer volume of music that Ada has put out in one form or another. But this is a real landmark, I think. A brilliant album that I cannot recommend highly enough. I also listened to, continuing my journey through the records of another podcast favorite, Chelsea Wolfe. I listened to his Spun.
Fucking goated.
Yeah, it's just really fucking great. I think it's probably my favorite Chelsea record. Yeah, it's very, very close between that one and Abyss for me, but I think that ultimately I have to give it to his Spun. It's just incredible shit.
His Spun is also a record that has some harrowing shit on it.
Yeah, I need to spend a little bit more time with it to fully unpack, everything that's going on. But incredible instrumental passages, and it just sounds great. I I wish I'd listened to it a second time and taken some notes to fully do it justice. But it's very fucking good. I also want to shout out. I listened to a record that came along towards the very end of the year. That sort of gained a lot of popularity and sort of came up from the underground in a really interesting way. And it's a record from the producer and dance music artist DJ Sabrina, the teenage DJ.
Yes.
Her instant house classic Charmed, which is definitely a big ask of listeners because it's a 3-hour long record, but it is remarkably well paced and just consistently fun. And it takes a certain template of house music and it sticks to that template, but it executes it and consistently in ways that feel consistently fresh across the runtime, and it really kind of sweeps you up in it. It's very much got like kind of Daft Punk Discovery energy. It's like it's like what I imagine like a boiler room set or like a live set in a dingy club with bright lights might sound like if Daft Punk were doing it circa 2000. But it's just it's just such an upbeat and uplifting and positive and pleasant and fun record. There's not a wink of darkness on the whole thing, but it doesn't feel cheesy or trite either. It's just a lot of fun. And there's so many tracks on it that are really strong contenders for the best electronic music tracks of 2020. So yeah, strongly recommend that record. And finally, the last one I'll shout out, the first album I listened to in this new year of 2021, another podcast canon artist, Steven Wilson, and his 2015 record, Hand Cannot Erase. Wow, what to say. I always try to pick really strong, memorable first listens, what I expect to be those for my first listen of a year. And this did not disappoint. It is one of the most immaculately, it is probably the single best mixed and produced prog album I've ever heard in terms of that technical aspect. I double fucking triple dare any of you to find a record that sounds better than this.
Does not exist.
There are records out there, I'm sure, that sound as good as it, but I don't think I've heard anything, particularly, or at least within the realm of progressive rock music, that sounds as polished as this does. And it's not too polished either, such that it feels like overly bright or saccharine or anything like that. Like it's when you get those kind of the riff, the more aggressive parts that come in, they hit hard. It's not a sense of everything being kind of glossy and shiny. It's a sense of knowing how every single element should sound and making sure it sounds that way. It's obviously the work of someone who has spent decades honing his craft as a recording artist.
I mean, Ancestral may be Steven Wilson as an artist's greatest achievement. Porcupine Tree is my favorite band of all time.
Quite possibly, like it's really outstanding. I also re-listened a few days ago to Jethro Tull's Thick as a Brick, which is a classic record that's grown on me a lot over the years. Maybe definitely one of my favorite prog albums ever. And specifically, I listened to Steven Wilson's recent remaster of it. And honestly, like that, he makes a record from '73 sound like it was recorded in 2015, the same time it recorded Hank Cannot Erase.
Like every Yes album too.
Yeah, exactly. He makes
so does someone want to explain to me why the new singles sound like ass?
Yeah, we're going to be covering some projects of Steven Wilson's before the new release, so thankfully we can gush about him before.
I think I know what Steven's trying to do with his new record, and we won't.
Yeah,
judge,
I think I do too.
And we won't judge it in full. I mean, obviously we can judge what we've heard, but we won't like give a full judgment until the record's out. But that will be, I think, an interesting review for a number of reasons.
A fair judgment. He
Ha!
produced the song.
Yeah. So, really big fan of that Steven Wilson record, Hinking on a Race. Adored it. Yeah, I think the title
May
track
or may
is-
not have an opportunity to expound upon those feelings at a later
Yeah.
date.
Exactly.
Oh my goodness.
We will be touching on
Talking
that.
about 2 of Morgan's top 10 favorite records here in the new
Yeah,
year.
we're just bowling right through them on this podcast.
As you know, as we should. If there's anything that our record clubs for, it's for doing that. And honestly, the next 2 record clubs that we're doing in terms of what I suggested are also records that are in my top 10 of all time. So that's going to be fun too. Anyway, let's move swiftly along to our reviews for the day. First up, we have the new Taylor Swift album, Evermore, the second release or a second studio release of Taylor's of 2020, the companion album to Evermore. Crucially, not a B-sides record, because I believe I was reading up about this morning. The vast majority of it was recorded after Folklore was released. The Folklore sessions were bounteous, and as a result, we got the 16-track album that we got. As longtime viewers will know, most of us on the podcast were not terrific fans of that record, really kind of going against the cultural grain there, considering that basically everyone loved it. I will say I still think that it's a good album. It just is a very bloated one, and it frequently becomes tedious. But I had, when Taylor Surprise announced Evermore, I was cautiously optimistic, and I'm not really sure why I was, considering how Folklore went, and then considering the initial response to that announcement was that it must be B-sides or something. Like, surely it's just going to be, more, and I'm sure on some level it is kind of like capitalizing on streams and stuff, and wanting to put more content out there. But also, I know Taylor is an artist and considers herself and is particularly trying to make her name as a singer-songwriter as opposed to just a pop musician or a pop singer. So I know that Taylor definitely is proud of the 15 songs on Evermore. I knew that she would be as soon as the album was announced. And it was also assuring to see that these songs were also, for the most part, recorded with Aaron Dessner of The National, who recorded about more than 3/4 of Folklore. And so I put the album on, and you know what? It's pretty fucking good. So I'm surprising myself in saying that, actually. It's not Taylor's great album. It's not her being ascending to the realm of the great singer-songwriters, but it is her, I think, taking some risks with her sound. Small risks, but I think significant ones in terms of still wanting to make a cohesive record that feels of a piece with Folklore, but also feels as though it's expanding on it in ways that are more interesting than some of the more standard fare on that record. Yeah, so does anyone have a particularly burning desire to launch into their review? Okay, Jake. All right, Jake, let's hear from you then.
Mainly, I'm gonna go full disclosure here. Only Morgan really knows my thoughts on what today's records are, because we discussed it at 4:00 in the morning today. But I was dreading recording today, not because I don't want to come back, but because I do not know how to speak about these 2 albums. In very different ways. I don't think they're of similar quality, mind you. And keep in mind, I was the second hottest person on Folklore here, I would say. I'd say Tyler was probably the one who liked it the most, and I'm probably a comfortable second. And I still think it's good. I think it's a good album, bloated album. Production is really distracting and inconsistent. And I think the thing that bugged me the most about the things that I said about Folklore was I was way too interrogative of what Folklore was as an artistic statement, I guess, and I was less I less went into the music, but I mean Tyler did that very well.
I think in
So
fairness, Jake, in fairness, Jake, and I'm sure Taylor knew this, that topic of like what folklore is and what it represents for her is something that kind of does precede the album. Like it was something that a lot of people were talking about. It dominated a lot of the critical discourse of it. So don't feel like that was a failing on your part because it had to be discussed.
That does make me feel a little bit better, and I also just sort of feel like because this is a companion album, it's just like there is nothing else to be said about Taylor Swift the artist and Taylor Swift the image and what folklore and like all of that baggage is just left behind now. I'm just gonna talk about like the music, like as an album, is this good? And like basically the entire experience that I had with this album is found within the first track, Willow. In that it sort of starts off, it's kind of quaint, it's sort of simple, and it's just like, okay, all right, it's kind of like gradually picking up a bit. I'm just like, this is interesting. I can't say that I feel like this would have fit comfortably on Folklore, just because that album was a very, like, I didn't think it was very unified, but even then this still felt like a bit of an outlier. So I was just like, okay, maybe I'll be like optimistic about this. This feels different. It's a different evocation, I feel like. And then I got to the lyric, I come back like a 90s trend. And I just was like, Taylor, why do you do this to me? Why do you hook me? You reel me in. And then there's just a dumbass thing you do, and I'm just like, I'm sorry, but it's not like it ruins it. I don't think Evermore is bad. I don't think that I don't even necessarily think this is a less consistent album than Folklore is. The problem is that for me it's more consistent, that it just doesn't do anything for me. It's there's not a pulse on this record. I feel nothing, and it's strange just because it's like, how do I articulate that I don't feel anything for this? And it's mainly through the fact that it's just like she keeps doing this, where I'm just like, I'll be into a song and then an instrumental choice will just be like, okay. It's admittedly less obvious here because on Folklore, the problem that I had with it, and I think that a couple other people did, were that it was very back and forth with Dresner and Antonoff, is that you could just tell who was producing each song, because just like, oh, this sounds like a song that Jack Antonoff would do, and this sounds like a National song. And here, it's a little bit more uniform. That said, it also just makes me feel like I just want to be listening to the National right now, because I went back through their discography recently and listened to all of their albums. And then when I listen to this, I'm just like, it's really also embodied by the song that features them, which is Coney Island, which I don't think is a bad song. It's just that hearing the National do this in lyrics that are not written by that band, that are clearly written by Taylor, is weird.
What it reminded me of is Matt Berninger actually did a feature on a song on Church's last album. The Scottish synth pop band Churches, and it was I thought it was very strange. It wasn't a bad song, but I feel about the same about it as I feel about Coney Island, which is that I don't particularly. It's not Coney Island's not one of my favorite songs on Evermore by a long stretch. And it just does feel weird to hear Matt singing lyrics that he hasn't written. And it's not an issue of Matt singing from a different perspective either, because you get that all throughout I'm Easy to Find, the most recent National record. It's just the difference is that it obviously feels like he's singing something that wasn't written by him. And he doesn't quite, I think, fit that song. And it's annoying because I know a lot of people were saying, myself included, when Folklore came out, it would have been awesome if she'd gotten Matt on one of these songs for a duet. Considering
and it just doesn't really work as well as you would think. Like, it doesn't not work, but it's just... And again, that's just the whole album for me, is that Evermore...
I have a take on why I think it doesn't work that I'll get onto when I talk about the
It is
record.
a lot of... it's just a lot of half measures, and on one hand, I'm just like, I respect Taylor for clearly, like, this is definitely not a B-sides album. Like, I get it. There's clearly, like, she just went in with an abundance of ideas and creativity, and clearly, like, whittled it down to be 2 select albums with 2 select identities. It's really just down to the fact that neither identity is really all that interesting. Evermore is weird because I would describe it as a more energetic album, and yet is the album that bothers me more by being more boring. And I don't understand how that's possible. But then I think about something like something like fucking Punisher, where that's not an album that ever becomes like exciting except for in like very sparse moments. And yet I'm there the whole time. Whereas Evermore is just a bit more like, I want Taylor to stop holding back. This is a criticism of Folklore that I had that was prevalent, and it's just that it's like, I know all art is performative, all art is this, all art is that, but please embrace your costume a little bit more. Like, every single song here is just like, this is a Taylor Swift song at its core, and it is nothing more than that, and it is just like everything else is window dressing.
I think,
and I feel like the only I'll just, this is my last thing I'll have to say on it, because I don't want to rattle on and print, like, just whatever. I just think the only marked difference here is that I'm not going to come at you and say that fucking Folklore should have won a Pulitzer, but I just think the lyrics on Evermore they just don't do it for me. I think they're just not as good as Folklore's were. On Folklore, I feel like there was a very specific, very nostalgic, very just there was an image there. There was an atmosphere that, like, even on its worst moments, I still felt was channeled very successfully. Whereas Evermore is just a bit more. It's a bit more fucking. I'd almost call it confused in that it's just like, it's all uniform, but it's uniform to what? And then I'm just like, and it's also, the other complaint I have with it is just, it's too fucking long. Every fucking, like, I don't think it's as well written as Folklore, and I just think that, like, you have a lot of fully formed songs here, but you don't have to use all of them. I think there is a perfect Taylor Swift album. Not a perfect album, there's a perfect Taylor Swift album. If you take the highlights of Folklore, highlights of Evermore, shove that into a particularly long EP or a short LP, and then you have the Taylor Swift album. It's not going to be unified, it's not going to make complete sense, it's not going to be a 10 out of 10, but there is a great album between these 2 okay albums. And I wish we got that instead of this.
I actually agree that if I wouldn't say an EP, I would say you could make a decent 12-track with songs from both of these records.
Sure.
But I will say one thing on the note of the Punisher comparison. I know you were wincing as you made it, but I actually think that it's a good kind of comparison to bring in here, because I think both Punisher and Folklore and Evermore by extension are immaculately produced and sounding records. It's just sound beautiful. But I think as to their success, or as to your individual success with those records, comes down to the extent to which you can get on board with Taylor's personality, or in which you can feel her personality, or relate to it, or enjoy her as a songwriter. Phoebe Bridgers and Taylor Swift have very different approaches to songwriting. And I think, and I've already prefaced by saying that I like Evermore quite a bit, and I do, and I'll explain myself. But I do think that if it has one flaw, and it certainly does have flaws, the biggest is the same as the biggest flaw with Folklore, which is that Taylor Swift, as a singer-songwriter, is not all the way there yet. And she gets tripped up. It's like you're watching someone trying to make a Joni Mitchell record who makes pop records, and and you get a dissonance there, because that's you get long lines like the 90s trend line. It sticks out immediately because it
reminds me of the new Miley Cyrus album. I mean, it's better than that, but it reminds me of that in like its artistic approach, and that it's just like you are watching someone semi-successfully do something, and it's not all bad, but it's also just like when you make art, and like it's supposed to be like you're supposed to get like a good feeling from it, and you listen to this, and it's just like it's supposed to evoke that, but it just evokes this like airy, vague pleasantness that I find completely uninteresting.
It's funny that Tyler should say that this is like someone trying to make a Joni Mitchell record who makes pop records, because we have an example of last year of someone trying to make a Joni Mitchell record who makes folk music in the new Laura Marling record, and it's incredible. And
that's a slightly different gap that she has to jump there than what Taylor's trying to do.
I was just trying to make a gag.
No, that's very apt. But yeah, and I okay, so I guess I'll just kind of launch into this. I do think that a key difference between Folklore and Evermore, I think that Folklore is a more consistent record, and Jake, you've kind of already made this point, I think. Folklore is a more consistent record in sound and approach than Evermore. Evermore is sonically on its face kind of scattershot, like it has, again, like I said before, it sees Taylor trying to expand the limits of the kind of sonic world she started out with on Folklore and take it in a few different directions. And as a result of that, for me, you get more compelling songs, but you get less of a necessarily well-formed record. And that, I think, is where I definitely agree that you could more selectively whittle down the best stuff from both records into a more uniform record. And I've actually been meaning to do that ever since I first heard Evermore, and I haven't gotten around to it yet. But
if you did that and like made your own version, like you did with Frank Ocean's Blonde, share that shit with me. I'd listen to it.
I will do that just because I've been meaning to. But anyway,
Folkmore,
Everlore, Folk Off. Anyway, I do think that in terms of sonic differences, more broadly between Folklore and Evermore, Evermore, it does generally, I think, have an earthier quality to it, less necessarily kind of less atmospheric or less focused on an atmosphere and more focused on the tangible sound of organic instrumentation. And
the album cover, man, it kind of tells you everything you need to know.
Yeah. Exactly. I think it's kind of a dumb cover just because it is. But the idea of a cover is fitting. But anyway, you get this kind of earthier approach demonstrated immediately on the first track, Willow, which I think is a standout on the record. It just sounds more dynamic, more kind of enveloping and immediate than most songs on Folklore did. I think the vocal melodies on the song are great, and I think the chorus is really, really good too. 90s trend lines accepted. And honestly, I think most of the issues I have with this record kind of do come in the first stretch of it. I think Champagne Problems is a very kind of typical Swiftian ballad. It has the same kind of run-on.
4 chords.
Yeah, 4 chords, but that's not inherently an issue, but it has the same kind of run-on vocal melody of na 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 that feels
it's an issue when you can't write a song.
Yeah, it feels very familiar as a kind of weak attempt to feign urgency.
Yeah, I mean, in my notes for Champagne Problems, I wrote down 3 songs that immediately reminded me of. The first one was Christina Perri's Jar of Hearts. The second one...
That's it.
4 chord song.
The second one was Someone Like You by Adele, which is a much better
4
song.
4 chord song.
And then the phrase How to Save a Life. And I want to tell you, one of those songs came out in 2005, and the other 2 came out in 2011.
Yeah.
And it opens with the 4 chords on piano in the way they do on The Axis of Evil, and it just sounds immediately kind of dated to me.
Look, I don't have an issue with the 4 chords or the chord progression. That's just like, if you were to make that complaint, you'd have to complain about, 80% of pop music. And Morgan might be sure, I'm going to do that. But
of course, right, but that's not necessarily what I'm getting at by making these comparisons.
Sure. My issue with Champagne Problems is not the specific chords it uses, but just the way in which the chords are, the melody is arranged, and particularly the way in which she sings and what she sings feels very uninspired. And you have
the storm was once a madhouse. I made a joke. Well, it's made for me.
Yeah, particularly I think that you can nail down all the lyrical issues here to the title, which is a very clunky and silly refrain. I get what she's trying to get at, like this idea of opulence that is intangibly tied to destruction, and it's just so bluntly put across with the word.
If I'm self-aware, then it's interesting.
Well, it's like she did this song better on like The Last Great American Dynasty or some
Yeah,
of the
that's
earlier
true.
songs on Folklore. And it just feels very standard and uninspired. And it's a shame that it's in the second song in the single position because it kind of it cuts away the interesting immediacy that you get from Willow, and it kind of just sours that. And I think that a lot of the inconsistency in this record is not necessarily that all these songs are on it. It's also a sequencing thing as well. I think this is sequenced particularly poorly. And it's not a huge complaint for me because, again, I like most of the songs on here, but they could have definitely been arranged better, just in terms of the way they're positioned on the record. And another example of that is going from Champagne Problems into Gold Rush, which I like Gold Rush. It's the one song that is produced by Antonov on the record, and I think you can tell it has that kind of muted electronic pulses in it that kind of immediately stand out from what you were hearing before. But I think the song would be much better in the second track position than in the third track position, where it just feels really strange coming after Champagne Problems. It has the kind of pulse that a second track on an album needs and the immediacy as well. I like the song. I do think that Taylor's vocal melody gets a little bit monotonous after a certain point, and that's an issue that she's kind of always really had, and it's become really apparent in her songwriter mode. But she does kind of switch it up by adding and removing bars every so often in her vocal lines, so it's not the worst thing in the world. And I also think that the bridge of the song is beautiful. I love the way that the mix blooms into these swelling vocal layers and pillowy synths. It's an absolutely masterful bit of production work from Antonov, and gets me really excited to see what he does. I don't know if it's a rumor that Lord is working with him again on her third record, or
I've
whether
heard that from multiple people, so I can only guess it's true.
So if that's true, because again, you can hear the traces of the work, of his style that he used on Melodrama in this song, I think. So I'd be interested to see how that turns out.
I'd even be down for a new Bleachers.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Me too. I think that one of the songs that has grown on me on the record is "'Tis the Damn Season," which I think has this gently picked electric melody that I quite like, and also a disorienting clatter to the percussion as it progresses. It's just a little bit more harder sounding and more aggressive in timbre than you would expect on a record like this, and I think it gives the song a bit of an edge that I really like. And instrumentally, I think the song, production-wise, it's fantastic. Skipping Tolerator, which I really don't have anything to say about because I don't really care for it at all.
Fucking flatline.
That's, I think, and Tolerated, I think, is another part on the record where you just get Taylor's limited songwriting style and reliance on these really kind of dull cliches that just absolutely cause her attempts at singer-songwriter stuff to fall flat. Again, lines like, what's the fucking thing she says in the song? It's stupid. Over and over, she says it a bunch of times. It's, now I'm fighting for footnotes in the story of your life or something like that. And it's like, that would work in a pop song maybe, but when you're trying to do your serious ballades mode with like this, it doesn't work.
Yeah, like even the 90s trend line, it's like you can make that fit in a cheeky pop song.
Yeah, like that's a shake it off line, you know? It's
yeah.
it's not a line for a record like this. Then I get to No Body, No Crime, which I'm just annoyingly mixed on because I love the spirit of it and the kind of idea of it. It reminds me, it's basically like the musical equivalent of that one Anna Kendrick movie, A Simple Favor, I think it's called. It's basically that movie as a song, but it's got Haim in it, and that's cool, and they're fun. I also like there's the touch of a harmonica on this track that I think is really cool from Josh Kaufman. It's like little details in these songs I think that really make them.
It probably just would have been a better Haim song.
Yeah, I mean, I think the storytelling, the way she goes about telling the story on the song is kind of clunky and really kind of perfunctory. But I think the idea of it is good. And again, it's also just weirdly positioned on this record between two quite somber ballads. And it just also, I don't know that it really fits on the record at all. but it's also
putting Happiness maybe the best song on this album right after it confuses the shit out of me.
yeah. I'm just about to get to Happiness, which is my
Good
favorite
song.
song on this record, maybe my favorite song that Taylor's ever made. It's not surprising at all for me to learn that this song actually started as a demo for a track that Destiner was writing for his side project with Justin Vernon called Big Red Machine. Um, I don't know if any of you were familiar with that.
Okay.
They put out a record together in 2018 uh, that is actually fantastic. Really underrated album they put out. It's basically Aaron Dexter instrumentals with Bon Iver singing on top of them, and they're like electronic and stuff. And it's really you can hear that it was kind of like some of the stuff that was going into Aaron's work on Sleep Well Beast and I Am Easy to Find, but it's more kind of proggy, and it's just
Bon
awesome.
Iver stopped making Bon Iver records challenge.
Yeah, but
Just
they're
not
also
letting people-
actually Aaron and Justin are actually working on a follow-up to that record that's supposed to come out this year. So I'm interested to see how that turns out. But apparently Happiness started out as a demo for that upcoming record, and then Taylor kind of took the song and added to it and wrote lyrics over top of it, and it's just a really moving song. I think it's the writing on the song is for the most part really great. I love the sentiment of there was happiness after you, but there's happiness because of you too. Both of these things can be true. It's a really kind of like mature way of addressing the end of a relationship that you don't want to end. And I think she has a lot of sentiments on this record.
It's fucking the potential she has as a songwriter is astounding, because it's like you have songs like Happiness and you have songs like All Too Well, and it's just like,
yeah,
I know I can't reasonably expect an artist to be operating at their 10 out of 10 literally all the time, but it's just like, I know there is true greatness in you, Taylor, and I know that literally everyone on the planet thinks that you are the best ever, but like,
yeah.
I know she can do better. And I know that sounds really fucking presumptuous, like, oh, who am I, some fucking schmuck in his bedroom, but it's just like, I know she has it in her to be like a top caliber songstress, and she's just not doing it yet.
Well, she's not doing it consistently anyway. I think there are others. I mean, Happiness is not the only spot on this record where I think that she writes well. But yeah,
not at all.
the song has a kind of slow building epic sweep of the Big Red Machine songs that I really love. It is the longest song on the record, but I think it earns every minute of its length. I really love it. And then actually I think that though there are a couple of spots on the back half of the record I'm not huge on, I do think this is actually a record that is considerably backloaded. Like a lot of the best songs are on the second half. A Dorothea I think is great. It has a really, really Destiner-esque piano melody. Like the second I heard it, I was like, this is just like the kind of piano melodies he was writing around the time of High Violet and Trouble Will Find Me. Like you'd hear it on one of those records. It reminds me of like B-sides from High Violet, like Exile Vilify and Wake Up Your Saints
Kind of
and
made
stuff.
me think of the shit Dexter did with Frightened Rabbit a little bit, honestly.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's just one of those really, really, really great piano melodies, and it's this looping, tumbling thing that, it's really good. And I think Taylor's pretty good on the song as well. I really dig this one. I already kind of alluded to Coney Island, which it feels 100% like a national B-side featuring Taylor, even before Matt comes in. It's just fine. It has a gently cresting build that I enjoy, but again, as we've kind of talked about, I feel that Matt is kind of ill-fitting on this song. And it's not really even his fault. That said, most of the rest of the record I think is excellent. I really enjoy the subtle country lilt of Cowboy Like Me, one of my favorite songs on the record that I was not expecting to enjoy based on that title, but I really dig it. It's got this really great lap steel addition from Josh Kaufman that's really well played, and Taylor, I think, obviously Taylor started out as a country musician, but I think she revisits that kind of rootsy sound well here, while not, making a huge leap away from the rest of the sound of the record. It's just kind of gently incorporating those elements subtly, and I really dig it. Long story short, immediately stands out for kicking off with these programmed drums that sound right out of like Sleep Well Beast, before you then get one of the most thrilling moments on the record, which is when you get Brian Devendorf's drumming kicking in, and you like the second the real drums start in the song, you're like, oh shit, it's the National drummer, because he's doing the same fills he does on the last 3 National records, and it just adds such a fucking what's the word I'm looking for? Like it brings the whole thing to life in a way that that has not really happened up to this point on the record, and that's fine because the record at its best exists in a kind of more moodier and slower mode and does that reasonably well. But this is a song where the pace really picks up, and I really wish that he had been included on more parts of the record doing that signature drumming. It's a really good song too. Taylor's like doing this thing lyrically where she's kind of like recounting shit that she's experienced over the years, and summarizing it. Long story short, I survived. And I think that it's kind of like a cool and acute sort of songwriter approach for that kind of topic, and I think that she does it pretty well on the song, honestly. Then you get this 3-track stretch of songs from Cowboy Like Me through Long Story Short through Marjorie. Marjorie's a great song. It's a haunting and emotional ode to Taylor's grandmother. It's a song that's kind of stricken with grief, but at the same time like a deep, devoted love for her grandmother, and a confidence that the experiences they've had together are not over or are not just consigned to the past. And that she kind of will still exist in some form in Taylor's life because of her love for her. And the song itself is beautifully sad and almost eerie. Again,
it sounds like otherworldly. It's a really inspired moment on the track list, honestly.
Yeah, no, I really adore it. And I like as well the way that it mirrors, it's a 13th song on this record, and it mirrors the 13th song on Folklore, which is about her grandfather. And that song was Epiphany, which I recall was one of the better songs on that record as well. So it's quite cool how, there is a structural mirroring going on in some senses between the two records, even if they don't sound necessarily hugely similar. I think that the industrial clutter of Closure is kind of a hilarious thing to hear on a Taylor Swift record. But
Yeah.
I actually think the tune is good.
It's like a jump scare when you.
What it actually reminded me of is like I'm almost certain that Taylor came up with the idea for that, or at least allowed it to happen after listening to like the last 2 Fiona Apple records or something, because that kind of like rattling percussion is straight out of Idler Wheel or like parts of Fetch the Bolt Cutters even. Like it sounds exactly like some of the percussion on those 2 records. And also obviously it's a piano.
Like Tom Waits.
Yeah, and it's a piano-driven song as well. So clearly it's channeling Fiona Apple, who's channeling Tom Waits. So I dig that. I think it's quite cool. I enjoy it quite a bit. And then you get the title track at the very end of the record with Bon Iver. I think is a fantastic song, a really good closer. It has a great kind of swell, and the vocals are just immense. Again, their duet on Folklore was one of the highlights of that record, and I think that they were such an inspired pair, and they knew that, and they capitalize on it again here. I really enjoy the whole closing stretch of this record from Cowboy Like Me onwards. I love it, frankly, and it does just make me again frustrated that the rest of the record, not all of it, but like parts of the rest of the record don't quite live up to that standard for me, and makes me only want even more to actually spend some time trying to piece the 2 records together. But yeah, it's a good album. I think I enjoy it a lot more than Folklore as an experience from start to finish, even if it has some structural issues and some weak moments. Look, I'm a Taylor skeptic, all right? So if you're a Taylor fan, you're watching this, you've got to understand that. And so me enjoying this record as much as I did is a real credit to Taylor. I think it's probably the record of hers that I like the most, actually, which is not saying a lot, to be fair, but it's true. And I'm mostly pleased because I did not expect to have that experience to the second Taylor Swift album of any given year.
In many ways, I'm deeply jealous of that experience because I also kind of wanted in. Because I mean, like I think I even said when we reviewed Folklore, I was just like, I really want to see what she does next because I feel like if she builds off of this. But at the same time, since it was all in the same session, I can't expect like a realistic artistic leap. And honestly, you hit the nail on the head. I think that the reason why this album is sort of shot in its Achilles heel for me, the real reason that I think I am so indifferent to it, is mainly because of the sequencing. Is that like once the album finally has a pulse, I'm already checked out. Like I'm like the first half of the album just,
Yeah.
and then the second half comes in and I'm just like, okay, cool, but like I'm tired. I know it's kind of a facile complaint, but I'm just kind of like, all right, can we?
It's
I just really wish this wasn't sequenced this way.
it's not facile though. It's
Okay,
perfectly valid.
Thank you.
Okay, Morgan, why don't you leap in then, and Saoirse can wrap up with her review.
The Taylor Swift anti has logged on.
We'll just go, we'll go anti-fan.
Okay. Okay. The best way I can put this is, Evermore is less consistent than Folklore, but what that means to me really is that it's less consistently annoying than Folklore.
It's
So
amazing how we have like reverse opinions about these albums. Like it makes total sense to me in a weird way.
it has its moments of, please, dear God, shut the fuck up. But you know, I point in particular to certain lines from, like we have said, the front half of the record, like just like I see that there's a song titled "'Tis the Damn Season" on a Taylor Swift album, and I'm like, oh fuck, here we go. And then I play it, and it's like, oh, this is exactly what I expected it to be from that title.
Fucking Jason Bateman with the dead pigeon. Don't know what
I don't know what I expected.
Infected.
It's more like Dewey and Malcolm in the Middle. It's like I expected nothing, and I'm still let down.
Yeah.
But
I am glad to see that you agree with me on like the lyrics thing, because I felt like a fucking crazy person thinking that this was a lyrical downturn from something that came in the same sessions as Folklore. Like that just fucking weirded me out.
oh no, it's not a lyrical downturn. I think it's just as stupid as a bunch of crap on Folklore. But
Fair enough.
yeah, it's, once again, the album is too fucking long. There are some genuine highlights here. I weirdly find myself really liking the Antonov track Gold Rush, especially considering I did not like the Antonov tracks on the previous album. Yeah, I think that song's really solid. I think Marjorie is like probably her best song, and Happiness is not far behind it.
Good take.
They're just,
Thrilled you agree with me there.
yeah. It's just like, it's baffling to me sometimes, because it's like these just moments of like really focused and hard-hitting songs lyrically, and then there's fucking, "'Tis the Damn Season" on the same album. It's like, all right, what? Why must you insist on vexing me? But yeah, this does have some highlights. I find Nobody, No Crime to be irritating, because it's like I feel the Carrie Underwood that you're trying to channel here, and it's just like, why is this song produced by Aaron Dessner? This makes no sense. Wait, what is this? It just confuses me and kind of annoys me. Pretty much on the back half, everything is either kind of completely innocuous to me. Like, I can't for the life of me remember what Ivy sounds like. Long Story Short is good. Marjorie is great. Can't remember Closure. The closing track is all right. I find Coney Island so jarring, just because it's like, this is something I said to Jake last night. It's like you hear Matt Berninger open his mouth and just absolute genius falls out, like exclusively. 100 out of 100. And here he is singing Taylor Swift lyrics, and it's like, this is bizarre. It's like I've gone through the looking glass. And the track around it is just fine, like I guess. And that's really my opinion on the album as a whole. Like, okay, why? Yeah.
Saoirse.
Right. Okay. So I'm gonna start my thoughts on the record by talking about Coney Island in a way, because I think my pros and cons of that song, kind of the pros and cons with the album in general, once I've listened to that song for the first time, because it changes how I view the album as a whole. And the thing is I feel like the last like 4 Swift records have all been driven by like a dramatic conceit in a way, where you have 1989, which is like the pinnacle of Taylor Swift's popness, and I don't like that record much because I think it's a lot of filler. And then you have Reputation, which is all about the Taylor Swift, the personality. And, you know, you have Lover, which is the hard left break from that. Hard left break, what am I talking about? The hard left turn from that.
You could have said that, and I would have just been like, yes. Mm-hmm.
A hard left break is actually pretty accurate.
Let's make that a thing now. Saoirse, you've made it a thing. I like it.
Thank you.
Brilliant.
And then we have Folklore. And I said when we reviewed Folklore that I feel like whatever Taylor Swift makes next will be the album which I will be thinking about the voice behind the work and not the sort of aesthetic it's going for. Not it's Taylor Swift the person and not the dramatic construct.
Oops.
And to a degree, I thought that was true. And then Matt Berninger, however you pronounce his surname, he opens his mouth on Coney Island. I suddenly realized, someone who like knows his way around this kind of music, who feels like he's at home here. And it just makes me reconsider maybe the album to the extent that previously I thought I was getting more of Taylor Swift the person, but it is again very much putting on the clothes of a kind of music, I suppose. Well, not that that's a bad thing, but it's something to reconsider. But it is very jarring to suddenly hear that verse on the song and like, now I wish I was listening to an album of this.
I have good news for you. There are at least 7 that will
I know. Like there are plenty of songs here that reminded me of Daughters of the Saoirse Riots, and there are points where I'd rather be listening to that song. But this is primarily
I also have those points on the album. They last an hour.
But no, this is primarily a positive review. I think really your mileage with this record will depend on where along the gradient of inconsistency you find yourself on this record, because it is unquestionably an inconsistent record. But if you sort of like more songs than you don't, compared to if you dislike more songs than you do, I think. Because for me, the opening stretch of the record is like I am looking around for something interesting and really struggling to find it. But
5 straight songs and no interesting lyrics. How come, Chief Willoughby?
I feel like Gold Rush at least has a good flow that guides you through the melody, and I like the guitar. What am I talking about? I like the guitar tone on Just a Damn Season, and I like the sentiment behind Tolerate It. And then you hit Nobody No Crime featuring Haim, which is Stephen King's A Good Marriage with Haim and harmonicas.
This is the first time that anyone has ever referenced A Good Marriage by Stephen King.
I'm reading it at the moment, so that's why.
I love that.
As someone who has read and really likes that story, on the money.
Saoirse, I love that you went to A Good Marriage and I went to that fucking Anna Kendrick and Blake Lively movie, A Simple Favor.
Clearly a top shelf fiction here at the Jansen T Podcast.
No, but I have like half an hour left of the audiobook. It's great. I love that book. Anyway, yeah, and I...
Fucking Christ.
Is it raining really hard where you are?
Yeah, it
Yeah.
sounds like a fucking
Yeah.
ocean is falling on my window.
I can hear it. I
It
know.
sounds like a light
Um,
patter, which means it's obviously a torrential downpour over
Yeah,
where you are.
it's like
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
a little scared.
Yeah, it's a perfect
It's the beginning
atmosphere.
of Hand Cannot Erase by Steven Wilson.
Oh yeah, that's an album that starts with
But
rain.
yeah, but it
No,
does
'cause-
provide the
I
perfect.
thought you were just gonna be like, yeah, that's an album.
It is.
No, like because
Uh-huh.
when I put it on yesterday, it was raining and like the rain started. I was like, holy fuck!
Yeah.
Right,
Because it was raining.
but basically, after Tolerate It, which is at the back end of a stretch of 3 songs, I think are like have things that could be developed more, but at least those things are there. And I don't care much for the first 2 songs at all. Champagne Problems. After about 11 times, the hook gets really fucking annoying. On
The
that song,
minute I finished Champagne Problems, I was just like, Saoirse's gonna hate this song.
it's
It
not
was the
good. It's
first
not
thought
good.
I had.
It's not good, and it feels so dated. But I've already talked about that. But anyway, and then Nobody No Crime starts. It's like song with energy and personality and hooks, and it's kind of like much of Swiss Souver at the moment, kind of overly trite and kind of 2-dimensional. But there is I enjoy listening to this song. It has personality to it. I think the vocal sample is really fucking dumb. When they say, as your sister says that she'd swear she was with me, and you just get someone go, she was with me, dude. It's just the worst thing you've ever heard in your
I
life.
like that part. That part's funny because it's
That's
like
good for you.
that is funny to hear SD turn up and just say that. It's really, I don't know, it got me giggling.
No, and again, I think that's the ideal reaction to something like this, because it's like a sardonically, kind of darkly cheeky song, in a way where it's like, Swift has this sort of string to her bow, you know? I would like
Yeah.
to see more like this, please. Yeah, and again, even though I have a minor nitpick with that song, I really, really enjoy listening to it for the most part. I love Happiness. It reminded me of like a love drunk pop 5-minute long version of Joy by Against Me. And I really dug it. There's some kind of hazy 80s synths that come in really far in the background towards the end. And it just gives it this really sort of nostalgia drenched vibe that I really love. And I think the lyrics are great. It feels so resigned in such a mature way that you can tell that maybe the lyrics didn't come from Taylor Swift, because she hasn't had a dynamic that's felt that mature for a long time, maybe ever. And yeah, so then you get Dorothea, which sort of, it reminded me of a lot of bands that to listen to it, you'd think nothing of it, but it's a fun sort of folky jam, even if I remember nothing about it. And then you have Coney Island, which whilst I like in theory, and I still think I enjoy listening to it in the context of the album, it's a strange cut. I think though that the singing is all around really interesting. I think the text is pretty cool, and I love the guitar melody on it. I like Ivy a fair bit. It's just a very calm and relaxing song with a nice instrumental flow. I like the production, and I agree with Tyler that the back end is pretty great from here on in. Cowboy Like Me, it gets stuck in my head when I listen to it. It's just full of sort of nice hooks, and I enjoy listening to it. Long Story Short is a really tonally jarring song, because that's where it's like, I'm at the back end of a Taylor Swift record. This is the first pop song. What's happening? But I enjoy it, even if it's a strange cut in terms of pacing. I agree that's a really, really badly paced record. And I think that, again, there are choices on this that would work better on a more conventional Taylor Swift record, like the way she extends every line in the chorus by a syllable. I think would work much better on a more proper pop song. And yeah, Marjorie, you've already said everything that there is to be said about it. It's really great. And Closure, I have no thoughts on. I remember nothing about it. But I like the closer Evermore a bunch. I think Bon Iver lends something really interesting to it, and I like the way it builds very slowly. I like the piano melody. So, in general, I think my problem with Folklore is that it goes in and out of your head like that, and it's quite bloated. Whereas with this one, I listen to it, and like I said, there are issues that I will have anytime I listen to it, but I'll come away from it thinking that was pretty good. And then songs like Happiness or like the guitar line on Coney Island, things like that, will just come back to me when I'm going about my day, and I'll just really enjoy having my head play these songs back to me in ways I didn't expect. That I think more of the sort of softer pop does really well when it does it. I remember in the first episode we talked about the 1975 album, and the thing is, when I talked about that one, it was like, there's a lot of great songs here, but they consist of half the record, so there are only so many points I can give it. And I think the same is true here, but it's about 3/4. I recommend it, but it is bloated, just like Folklore was. Taylor Swift has not yet found her groove in this vein of songwriting, although I want her to explore it more, I think.
Good stuff. All right, well, let's move into our favorite tracks and ratings then.
Yeah, when we said I would love to see Taylor explore this this singer-songwriter
Fucking
aspect of
monkey's
her
paw
music.
shit.
Well, I mean, it's like, it's not quite monkey's paw, but it's like, we said that, and then she's like, all right, new album on December. We were like, what, not now. We didn't say now.
Yeah, just because it's from the same studio sessions, it's just like, you know.
Mm-hmm. Like, what were there, like 4 years between 1989 and Reputation? And it's just like bang, 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 album after that. And it's just slow down. Take the time, polish your record.
I just think that's like the culture of where streaming is at right now, is that people with Taylor Swift's notoriety can just do something. It's like when fucking Drake dropped that double album. Why? He did it because he's Drake and he's going to get a lot of streams. Taylor Swift did it because her label was probably like, hey, all that other stuff that didn't make the album, you can probably release that. It'll do really, really well.
I mean, there's a reason that these two albums are an hour long, and the Drake album was like 8 years long, because it's better for streaming.
Best compliment I'll give Taylor is that I have far more patience for her than him.
Well, Taylor has talent, so.
Yeah.
And then you have an artist like Kendrick who hasn't put anything out in approaching 4 years.
Motherfucker, if you don't drop in 2021, I'm going to find you.
I think he definitely will be. I'm pretty sure like there was someone like saw a music video being filmed or something like a month ago. So
yeah, that I remember that.
So it's definitely
I
coming.
will wait. I will wait as long as I damn well have to.
But I respect that integrity. Like he's not putting shit out until it's ready.
Yeah. I mean, it's
Lord
sort of ironic. We said that we had Taylor Swift putting out album after album, and we said earlier that Folklore isn't going to win a Pulitzer.
Yeah, speaking of Lord, I remember last month, because I'm on her mailing list, and I got an email from her for the first time in years.
You got an email from Lord?
Yeah, because I'm on her mailing list.
Dear Tyler.
Oh, they're both from New Zealand, so I understand.
Oh,
they all know each other over there.
She's down the fucking road. She lives down the road.
Exactly, yeah.
Anyway, she got an email from Lord's mailing list, I should say, rather than from Lord. And it was like, oh shit, email from Lord for the first time in years. And I was like, oh fuck, album announcement. And she was like, hey guys, so I've been in Antarctica.
Recording an album, Lord?
No, she just went to Antarctica to like...
Recording an album with Metallica in Antarctica.
Recording an album with fucking Adrian Veidt from Watchmen.
No, she went to Antarctica and she just wanted to share that experience with all of us. So that was fucking hilarious. It's so Kiwi too. Like, holy fuck, I'm in Antarctica. Anyway.
Once again, a stone's throw.
Yeah, exactly.
Right,
okay, let's rate this son of a bitch. Yeah. That's you, by the way.
Okay.
Yeah.
3 favorite tracks. Pretty easy to narrow down here. That being Marjorie, Happiness, and Gold Rush. Least favorite track. I really do hate to say it, but I'm gonna go with No Body, No Crime, just because that song like mildly infuriates me. I don't even think that's my least favorite. I just get angry when I listen to it because I'm like, why is this not good? And 5 out of 10.
Fair enough. Morgan.
My three favorites are Marjorie, fucking, what's the one? Happiness. Shit, what's the good one?
Gold Rush.
Happiness is a good one.
and Gold Rush.
Those are all mine.
And least favorite, Just the Damn Season. And I'm also gonna have to go with a 5.
Okay, so that's me, and I'm giving my favorite tracks on this record are probably, I'm gonna say, Nobody No Crime. Very sorry. I might go.
I don't
with...
dislike anything on this for me to get angry at you. Like.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. So
Seems like a song. Fuck you.
So let's go with Marjorie and probably Ivy for the other tracks. And my least favorite, no prizes for guessing, is Champagne Problems. But overall, this record is getting a 7.5 from me, which is a 1.5 more than I gave Folklore.
Nice. So my three favorites are Happiness, Marjorie, and I will also throw in Cowboy Like Me. And my least favorite track is Tolerate It, and which I love that like almost none of us talked about that song.
I don't recall it.
Retroactively make that my least favorite song by virtue of what the fuck is it? I don't know.
I plead the
so
fifth.
I forgot to say Happiness, which if I'd have remembered would have been in my top 3.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny you don't remember it, Morgan, because I remember when you started listening to this and you were tweeting about it and you got to that song and you said, "This is shit." I remember that.
I don't.
Anyway, I'm giving the album a 7.5 also.
Nice. Okay, so that brings it out an average of 6.3, which is equivalent to what we gave Disco and Lulu.
Fantastic. And it is also 2.1 points higher than the average for Folklore.
That's hilarious.
So good for her.
I think Apocalypse August isn't here, I think.
Oh god.
That's a good point.
Morgan giving a Taylor Swift album a 5 is like when he gave the Rustin Kelly album a 6.
It's the reverse of that. It's like the Nego Rustin Kelly.
Okay, well, let's move on to our second review of the day, which is the new Avalanches album. The third Avalanches album, the second since they reformed / kind of changed their sound a little bit.
Since they left us, you might say.
So
Really funny.
I'm going to have nothing to contribute to this other than comedy. I'm so sorry.
that's okay. Yeah, so it's called We Will Always Love You. And it continues in the same vein as their previous record, Wildflower, in the sense that it's kind of a sprawling, collaborative spree, odyssey, and it has kind of flows from like start to finish as this kind of like consistent party, basically. And that was the same as kind of like what Wildflower did, and I suppose what Since I Left You does as well. But yeah, this also has a really interesting concept. I don't know if any of you have read about the concept behind this record, why it's called what it is, and also what the album cover represents.
Well, I know that it was not always going to be called this. It was going to be called Pink Champagne at one point, but they changed it to not sound like another record.
Oh, okay. I did not know that. So that's an interesting little aside. But basically, the whole record has a kind of cosmic, interstellar theme where it's kind of about life and existence and love and basically like the point of living. And it's inspired by, I'm just going to read from the press release. It's inspired by the majesty of outer space, the light from celestial bodies, and the romance between the starry-eyed scientists Andrian and Carl Sagan, who attempted to encapsulate the human experience on a pair of golden records, which they blasted into space in 1977. And I believe you hear samples from that record or like Morse code from that record or something from that golden record that was blasted into space like fucking nearly 50 years ago on this album. And actually, the album art is a photo of Andruyan, which is run through a spectrograph, turned into sound, and then processed back into an image. So that's kind of a cool concept. And the idea is to like, basically kind of make you think about the universe and your place in the universe, and sort of make you feel more connected to the people around you. Basically a response to the year that 2020 has been, and an attempt to kind of try and make a record that feels like a party where you get to kind of come together, you know, as one or whatever, with everyone in a kind of shared feeling of love and camaraderie. That's the whole idea behind the record. And I think that concept, that unification, automatically gives the album a strength that I think was lacking from Wildflower, which is a good album, has some really good songs on it. It has the same kind of structure and flow, really good highlights, really great collaborations on that record too. But I think that We Will Always Love You is even better. I think that for the most part, the collaborations are just as good, if not stronger, more idiosyncratic. And I think one potential issue that I could see people having with this record that I didn't have is that the vibe is very consistent, such that it may even run together and feel a little bit bloated. And I can't really disagree with that. It's a 70-minute record. It's a long motherfucker, and it's not as though there's a lot of sonic variety on it. But I do find every time I put this on, I kind of just get swept up in it. And I think that the way that they utilize vocal samples, they have lots of creative sample sources on this record, as they do on all their records, but they utilize vocal samples in a really minimal but effective way. Like you'll just occasionally get snatches of phrases or of wordless vocal loops that are integrated into the mix and just kind of add this real sense of humanity, or of like personality, or like love, or reaching out to the song, that I think is quite affecting. And there's a sense on this record of love between the collaborators as well. I think there's one sample on this record where Pink Sifu, or one of the other collaborators, sings to Karen O, who of the Years, who's also on this record, and says, "We're reaching out to you, Karen," or "We're thinking," or "We love you, Karen," or something like that. Like just tiny little details like that, where the whole thing is kind of melded together to feel like a familial experience. But it's not all like necessarily pure happiness and love. Like there's also like an understanding of loss on this record as well. Like there's a sense of grief at the loss of Carl Sagan specifically, but also of just the idea of like, when you consider the universe and our place in it, you also start to think about death and the impermanence of life and stuff like that. And some of the songs and the moods in the songs kind of touch into that as well. There's also, I think, the most pertinent reference to death on this record is the fact that on two separate songs, I believe on the interlude that Karen O does, and also on the song Running Red Lights with Rivers Cuomo, on both of those songs, there's an interpolation of lyrics from the Silver Jews frontman David Berman's last album, Purple Mountains. They sing lyrics from the song Darkness and Cold on that record. Specifically, the light of my life is going out tonight in a pink champagne Corvette. The light in my life is going out tonight without a flicker of regret. That song, incidentally, is one of my favorite songs of 2019. And the moment I heard
it's a powerful song.
And the moment I heard that lyrical interpolation, it was kind of like hit me like a fucking freight truck. So this record is so strangely bittersweet and joyous, but also sad as well, and fun. Again, I know you guys have said that you've struggled to kind of articulate or how are you going to talk about this album, and I'm kind of struggling as well a little bit, but to me, I just find it to be this kind of quite joyful and moving experience. especially listening to it at nighttime. I mean, I'm lucky that it's summer here where I am, so I've had a lot of like warm, clear sky nights, and I've put this record on and either gone for a drive or just kind of sit there looking out the window, and it just feels like the perfect companion to that. You can dance to it, but you can also kind of just lie back in a chair and recline and just let it fill your head with colors. Yeah, it's just really something special, I think. I won't pretend to say that it's like a masterpiece or even that it's as good as Since I Left You, which is just a landmark of plunderphonics. But it's an entirely different vibe, and I was considering that I felt a little bit let down by the experience of Wildflower as an album as a whole. I was pleasantly surprised with how much I enjoyed the experience of this record.
I think it's a testament just to like how music, I guess how the discussion of music works, and that like when I said that I struggled to talk about this album, it's not an indicator of quality because honestly, I like this record quite a bit. Honestly, it's just one of those albums that's very hard to verbalize your feelings on because it is so like it is best described while it's happening.
Yeah.
It's a very in the moment kind of feeling, and I feel like that's sort of like the objective of the album. It's to give you this sense of like place to like wherever you're rooted, and then just sort of take you somewhere. And in many respects, I think it like succeeds. Tyler did say he envisioned some people having the problem that it runs together, and that's probably my biggest problem with it is that it's very difficult to like I find myself really latching on to where I am in the album or what particular song I'm on based solely on the feature, whereas it's just like everything sort of in between the features just sort of like it goes together well, don't get me wrong. It just feels like there is less when there is less happening. It's just like when the mix gets a bit more spacious, when it's sort of easing up in the sort of lull it has between its features, which there are many of. I don't find it as terribly interesting, but I really love songs like the MGMT featured one. What's that one called?
Oh, that's a great song. It's
Yeah,
called
The Divine Chord.
Divine Chord.
Yeah,
That's right.
like the Divine Chord. I think that song's fantastic. It's produced like this album too is pretty much like marvelously produced. It sounds immaculate. Just the way everything is interpolated sounds great. Except for I'll just go ahead and get this out of the way. We talked about this when the album dropped, and I'm not a fan of Running Red Lights at all. That has not changed. I look Rivers. I like quite a bit of your albums. I even go to bat for a couple of them that not a lot of people like all that much. But you just you're annoying. Stop.
Well,
I,
I
I
will
the,
say, I will say for that song, I think that I don't like Rivers on that song, but I do like the song. I think that there are lots of things about it I enjoy. It's just that
I
when
wish I could say he didn't ruin it for me, but he just kind of does, and it's
fair
like,
enough.
and I just hate his lyrics. He says some fucking bullshit about Schrodinger, and I'm just like, oh man, shut the fuck up. I hate you.
It's like so like it's pure. It's the same kind of
Like a
lyricism.
thundercloud.
It's like
I'm
its lyrics
fine.
are straight out of the last few Weezer records.
I
Like
mean,
Black
it sounds
Album.
like shit off of like Hurley. Like I'm just like fucking whatever, man. But like again, for that's I don't want to take away from the fact that most of the features here are very creatively implemented. They're full of personality. I think one that really caught me off guard was it Denzel Curry?
Yeah, he's on
Mm-hmm.
this.
Denzel Curry just shows up and fucking like murders it. I think that an album that is very, very comparable to this in structure and just like not in sound, but just I feel the avenues it takes to achieve its goals is the most recent Flying Lotus album, Flamagra, which I love. It's not a popular album to love, but I do. Um, That said, I feel like it bridged the gap between its bigger moments a little bit better. It's sort of just, it had more defined connective tissue, and it had these fucking like weird cycling IDM moments that was just like really throwing me for a loop. I was just like, damn, Flying Lotus is just fucking all over this shit. He's going so hard and doing so many things that he would never have done on other records. It's cool. Whereas this, it's like, from what I've heard of, like, I've listened to stuff like Since I've Left You, and I'm just like, this does feel a bit like them on autopilot, even though autopilot for them is really good. Um, but I do also appreciate that, like, it definitely, like, I didn't know the concept of the album, but I definitely got that, like, emotional impression. There's a, like, a spirit of just sort of, like, partying and like happiness, and just sort of like elevating you like beyond all of this stuff. And yeah, you know, it has moments of darkness, but I appreciate that while I'm listening to it, I'm just kind of like, it really gets you in the sway of its groove, and I admire that, just because it's like, you know, yeah, 2020 was a fucking awful year. If you can get me to dance, you're doing a pretty fucking good job at whatever it is you're doing. But yeah,
Also, like
I
this,
just
this album opens with a sample of like someone like leaving a goodbye message before they die. Like
yeah,
it's this
ominous
morbid
and
fascination with death, and just like the trying, like this notion of like wanting to keep existing in some form, or like, I don't know, I'm
Mhm.
getting all fucking
No, I
into it,
think
but
that's like absolutely on point like observation of this. I think that's the attitude of the album. I think that's what you're supposed to take away from it. It's just this very bright, energetic, and like, it's, you know, it's not like the lyrics are super indicative of like anything in general. It's really just more suiting whatever artist is coming on there, and just sort of like doing things for the sake of, you know, pure musical aesthetic and style, and it works. But it's also just really good at evoking that particular emotion out of you. It's what all great electronic music does, in a sense, in that it takes away from the whole like relying on lyricism to invoke the mood, where it's just like, all right, we're gonna do this with pure music, which in many ways is like doubly as impressive, because it's like you have basically half the components that other people use to normally build tone. And yeah, I think it's great. I do think I do think it's too long. I do think it runs together, but everything good on it is so good that it's like, yes, okay, I can get behind this. I think it is like just shy of being truly great. It needs to be trimmed down, in my opinion. It needs to be condensed a little bit. I just feel like it needs to be tightened up. It feels a little bit loose, feels a little bit flabby. Especially like in the middle. I think the first third and last third are like immaculately good, and it just kind of loses itself a little bit. Like every subsequent listen, I just sort of like, there's not like, none of the features are grabbing me in the way that like the instantaneous ones did. But I had a very good time with this album, despite my problems with it. I think it's just like, the Avalanches are clearly so good at what they do that even something that is like mildly underwhelming is still pretty damn good. So, you know, I enjoy it when it's on. I can't like remember all that much about it other than a few select highlights, but I listen to it, and I feel a little bit happy inside. So good job, good
Yeah,
album. I
I
like it.
think, yeah. So I think that's a very valid response. I listened to the debut album Since I Left You recently, because it had a big anniversary. And I loved it to fucking pieces. That album just felt like it was sort of joy in audio form to me. This is, as we've addressed, slightly more melancholy. It opens with, I took it more to be a message from the other side, using the title of Ghost Story.
That was definitely the vibe that I got to.
Yeah. But overall, like, this album is approaching from like a much more sort of nostalgic place. Whereas like Since I Left You felt to me like living in the moment. Often to me, this feels like looking back to a wonderful summer 10 years ago and slowly realizing that it's gone forever. I mean, especially the River Cuomo chorus on Running Red Lights. But in general, like it just has this wonderful sort of treacly vibe. I felt like I've stepped into this wonderful like pool of goo that I'm just sort of sitting in. That's a really sort of pleasant experience.
Love me a wonderful pool of goo.
A wonderful pool of goo.
Who doesn't?
I'm good.
Yeah. But like there are so many songs here that just make me feel really, really wonderful. Be it the slow, sort of wonderful transition from Ghost Story to Song for Barbara Payton with those wonderful synths and the way it goes into We Will Always Love You featuring Blood Orange, or The Divine Chord with that wonderful melody that MGMT bring to it. Or wonderful, like I actually think that the best examples are on the back half. Songs like Take Care in Your Dreaming, or Music Makes Me High, or We Go On, which has one of the most jaw-dropping moments I have had in music in 2020 when I realized they were sampling the Carpenters.
That was some
like,
shit.
Yeah, like you listen to the Carpenters version, there's like, you know, jangly bangly, we go on hurting each other, and then you listen to this and it's the slow build to a really like transcendent climax, and like Karen Carpenter sounds like she is singing Karen Carpenter feels like she is singing to you with from like the soul of a little baby in front of you. It's crazy.
Can't disagree.
Yeah, right. And yes, I'm trying to find in my notes the name of the song that has Denzel Curry on it. Take Her in Your Dreaming, which I love. And I love the way it treats the chorus. I love the way it almost starts with like a trap beat with jazz chords over it. It's just, or sort of jazz piano playing over it. It's fucking great. And I think Denzel Curry brings his A game, does an amazing job. But also the other rapper on the song, Sampa the Great, if anything, surpasses what Denzel brings to it, in my opinion. This album is such a fucking party. It feels like a gospel choir who are worshipping the idea of music. It's just, the point is to sit there from beginning to end and lie down and have it wash over you and just get caught up in this big like fondue, this layer cake of an album. Just to get indulged in the party. It's one of those records where even if there are faults, it doesn't matter so much. Even if there are excesses or bits I don't necessarily love so much, it doesn't really matter because you take it as it is. That's basically my take on the record.
Fucking okay. The Avalanches. We Will Always Love You. It's good. It's quite good. It's quite a good album. It's first Avalanches release I have heard. Just never got around to since I've left you for whatever reason. But yeah, this I really enjoyed this. I do share the complaints that it is too long and runs together too much. I think if this were trimmed down, this would be one of the best records of 2020 and at least one of the most interesting. But it really does outstay its welcome for me. Especially when it kind of just explores the vibe it wants to explore as many times as it does. Parts of it just end up feeling a bit superfluous to me. But I do find the feeling that it invokes to be really fascinating and sort of really sonically compelling, and they explore that in really interesting and really catchy and fun ways. I think the song with MGMT and The Only Smith We Acknowledge.
Yes, sir.
The Divine Chord. I think that's a great one. I really like Reflecting Light and Take Care in Your Dreaming. There are a lot of highlights on here, I think. It's definitely a strong outing. But because of its length and its sort of, I don't want to say repetitive, but it's a bit repetitive. Because of that, I kind of, there's not much about it that really sticks with me.
No, fair enough.
Tyler about to be like, you're having a fundamental misunderstanding.
No, I think Morgan probably might even give this record a higher rating than I will. and I liked it quite a bit. Yeah, I just want to shout out before we wrap up a couple of cool things about it, like the samples. But before I do, I just want to shout out the song with Kurt Weill on it. I don't know if any
Oh
of you.
yeah,
I don't know if any of you are super into Kurt Weill.
I'm not, but I feel like I should be.
But yeah, he's this great kind of like dreamy kind of guitar dude with like long hair. Who's like, yeah, he put out a great record.
Exactly
He's put
who
out
you
multiple
imagine a
great
guy with the
records.
name Kurt Weill looks like.
The male Courtney Barnett.
Yeah, exactly. And they, of course, they made a record together. So
Yeah.
But anyway, I just want to shout out the track he turns up on because it's like there's this dance beat that starts, and then he comes in going, yeah, yeah, and it's like immediately there's just this dissonance between Kurt's vibe and this dance beat.
It's fucking
But
that gif
the
of
song's
Jay-Z being like,
Huh.
just really confused.
He just comes in going, literally the first sound he makes is, yeah.
It's like he didn't know what he was recording that day. He's just like,
It ends up being a really good song. So
Yeah.
shout out to Kurt
Yeah.
for that. And some great samples. It wouldn't be an Avalanches review if someone didn't shout out some of the samples on this record. I think some of them have already been mentioned.
Yes.
But one song I didn't get to talk about, but that is one of my favorites on the record, is Born to Lose, which comes at the tail end of this record.
Yeah, great song.
Really fantastic banger. It has, interestingly enough, it has a sample of Frank Ocean's cover of Moon River in it, which I think is really cool. Most of the samples here are from 70s, 80s records, but that's a really cool incorporation of something more modern. We Go On obviously has a really beautiful sample of the Carpenters hurting each other in it. That's the core of the track. That is really affecting. Wherever You Go is obviously built around a sample of a song by Little Jimmy Osmond. We Will Always Love You, the title track, is built around a sample of a song from Smokey Robinson, which I think is really awesome. Interstellar Love, which is a great song, is built around this really addictive loop from the Alan Parsons Project's Eye in the Sky, which is a great song.
the Alan Parsons Project.
The Alan Project Parsons.
Yeah. But they're a great band, and that's a great song. Also, The Divine Chord would not be what it is without the sample from a song by the Shirelles, actually, from the 60s. It's Love That Really Counts. Again, the sampling choices here and the way they're integrated is really what makes a lot of these tracks what they are. Just really, really creative stuff. I think also the duo said that this album was kind of like an attempt to finalize their transition from like the purely Plunderphonics act that they used to be to like a proper band now. And I think you certainly kind of get that. An obvious comparison that I didn't bring up, but that does leap to mind, is that this record does play and feel a lot like what Gorillaz try to do on their records, particularly on their new, obviously they put out a record very recently as well, the Song Machine album, which is, I always have mixed feelings on the Gorillaz. I've talked about them in a previous episode, I think. But the Avalanches, to me, are what the Gorillaz are to a lot of people. I
didn't even fully fuck with this, and I like this considerably more than any Gorillaz album I've listened to.
I kind of wish that the Avalanches got the kind of level of esteem that the Gorillaz get. But I do think as well that the reason that records like Wildflower and this fit in the time that they're in is in no small part due to what the Gorillaz have done as well. So there's a kind of a reciprocal chain of influence there. Gorillaz are no doubt influenced by Since I Left You, which came out a year before their first album, I believe. And so now things have kind of come full circle. Incidentally, if you haven't heard Wildflower, despite the fact that I don't like it as much as this, you should still check it out. It has really great features from Danny Brown and MF Doom on it, which feels pertinent to bring up today. But anyway, this album's awesome. Let's do our favorite tracks and ratings.
Yeah.
I would love to.
Let's do the opposite order since that's fun.
Yeah, I'm down with
I'll
that.
go first. My three favorite tracks are The Divine Chord, the title track actually, and Born to Lose. My least favorite track, not including the interludes, I suppose, is probably Ghost Story Part 2. And I will give this album a very strong 7.5 out of 10.
Nice. So my three favorite tracks probably include "We Go On," love that Carpenter sample. "Music Makes Me High," and I want to say I'm gonna say "Take Care of Your Dreaming" as well. My least favorite track is probably "Wherever You Go." And I'm giving this record an 8 out of 10.
Word. My three favorite tracks are "Reflecting Light," "The Divine Chord," and "Take Care in Your Dreaming." My least favorites, I have "Oh the Sun" written down.
Oh,
I
the
don't
Perry
remember
Farrell
it,
track.
so I'll.
That's the Perry Farrell one. I don't remember it at all.
Yeah, yes, yeah.
It's like 2
It's
minutes.
a song.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It is
7
indeed
out
a
of 10.
song. Chill.
Damn, insightful shit here. Yeah, my three favorite tracks are Divine Chord, really original with my picks here.
You're doing great.
Uh, Music is the Light, I really love. Good
Mhm.
fucking song. And I will also say Music Makes Me High, or Music Makes Me High. And
Mhm.
least favorite, Running Red Lights. And I give the album a 7.
Chill.
Beautiful. Wow.
So it lands at 7.4 out of 10. We only have 2 records to give to that. One is Carlcraft, Full Circle Nightmare. The other one is Magic One of Tricks Point Never.
Fair enough.
This and the new One of Tricks Point Never album feel very of the same kinship.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Well, that's our reviews for this week. Welcome back to 2021, and thanks for sticking with us. We actually don't have our reviews for next week nailed down. I know we're planning on covering the new Playboi Carti album, which will be interesting. But stick around, follow our Twitter, and you'll get to hear whatever we do decide to cover. We'll announce that. Obviously, go and check out our Record Club video for this week, which is on Third Eye Blind, self-titled. And yeah, I think that's basically. Anyone have anything they want to plug? Oh, also go and listen to August's new single,
Yes,
obviously.
please do.
New Glacier Flower track, which is called Silver.
Yeah, exactly. It'll be on the Glacier Flower YouTube page, so either search that up or it'll probably be in the description, actually. If it's not, then you can pester Jake about that. But yeah.
And
Anyway.
so rock over London, rock on Chicago, pork, the other white meat.